Happy Friday afternoon, everybody. I'm meteorologist Tim Pandages here with your Atlantic Tropical Update. And we've got a hurricane to talk about. Danielle strengthened this morning to become a Category 1 hurricane, the first of the season, and the first hurricane in over 330 days. It's been a long time for the Atlantic. Today is September 2nd, 2022. All right, here's the season by the numbers for your wrap-up today. 332 days since there's been a hurricane in the Atlantic Basin. By the way, the last hurricane was Category 4 Hurricane Sam back last year in the 2021 season. 12 named storms up to this point in 2021. This year, we're only at 4 with one hurricane. We had 5 hurricanes up through this point last year. And there are 88 days left in the 2022 Atlantic hurricane season. All right, here's our scorecard when we put the Atlantic up against the Eastern Pacific, which, if you've been paying attention, the Eastern Pacific has had a very active season so far. They're now up to number 11. Javier just developed as a tropical storm in the Eastern Pacific. Meanwhile, we've got Category 1 Hurricane Danielle to focus our attention on, even though it's not going to be impacting anybody, which is the best part of all of this news. It's a hurricane in the middle of the open Atlantic, not causing any impacts to human beings. 75-mile-an-hour winds. Look at the speed. Moving to the west, it's basically stationary. Moving to the west at 1 mile per hour. 992 millibars, its pressure has dropped down to. Infrared satellite imagery here over the last couple of hours certainly shows that it has that look of a hurricane. Even more so when we flip around and show you visible satellite that at times shows an eye trying to clear on out in the center of Danielle there. But when I show you water vapor imagery, something very interesting to take note of here. Dry air, moist air. Dry air in the yellow. Notice it getting ingested into its circulation, and that could be putting a stunt on any future intensification, at least for now, until it can work that dry air out. So right now it's capped at a Category 1, 75-mile-an-hour winds. Forecast to get up to 100-mile-per-hour Cat 2. So we'll see if this dry air will have anything to do with that. But nonetheless, it's still going to stay away from any land masses. Closest is the Azores there, and of course Nova Scotia and northern portions of Greenland, or southern portions of Greenland, but not going anywhere near that. So here's the forecast track of Hurricane Danielle, sitting over the same general area for about the next 48 to even 72 hours through almost all of Labor Day weekend. And then it starts to build north, tops out at Cat 2, the forecast is right now, at 100-mile-an-hour winds Monday morning, and then starts to build its way off to the north and east. Wind field expands, and it gradually begins to weaken a little bit. So why such a strong system this far north in the Atlantic? Well, the water temperatures in this part of the Atlantic are actually at record high levels. Everything shaded in red or maroon here is water that's at 80 degrees or warmer, and that is what's needed for tropical development. And this far north is very, very unusual. Now, on top of that, the water is at a depth, right? So we've got warm waters that extend down several, dozen meters, at least in this case, this far to the north. And that means that since this is sitting and spinning over the same area, it's mixing up the ocean water, something we call upwelling. So eventually this will run out of the heat energy here as it keeps upwelling cooler waters from a depth, but it's got a little bit to work with there until it starts to drift its way north and out of that upper ocean heat content that's currently in that area. So what do the models see with this? The Gfs and the European model both are pretty much right on target, right on top of each other of this storm, intensifying a little bit more in the next couple days and then drifting its way off into the North Atlantic, maybe even up towards the Arctic Circle by the time we get to the end of next week. So no threat to any land at the moment. So now we've got Invest 91L. Well to the south is a separate tropical wave. Here's the northern Leeward Islands. This one's moving to the west-northwest at 13 miles per hour. Pressure at 1,008. Very discombobulated, very broad circulation. Satellite imagery here is not all that impressive. We are seeing some flare-ups of convection. You can see that with the cloud top temperatures of yellow and black here, indicating very cold cloud tops extending to a high altitude, meaning they're stronger. And if they start to wrap around that center there, we could certainly see this maybe get an upgrade to tropical depression, or since it's somewhat near land, it could certainly become another potential tropical cyclone that we've seen numerous times already this season. Nonetheless, the Hurricane Hunter aircraft staging out of the U.S. Virgin Islands is currently in that system right now, and I wish this actually was not laying on top of each other, because it does show that they found winds of nearly 50 miles an hour within the center, and their mission last night showed a closed center of circulation, but very broad and stretched out. So we have the winds of at least 39 miles per hour that you need for a tropical storm, and we have a closed center of circulation. So we'll see if we get this as an upgrade later today. The next name on the list, by the way, is Earl, which will be the 5th named storm of the season. Here's a look at it on visible satellite imagery. You can kind of see that center there. It almost looks like there's a little bit of some wind shear working that convection off towards the east of that center there. But nonetheless, it does show just kind of two bulbs of convection. One off to the west, another off to the east, potentially some wind shear getting worked into this system as well. Dry air, not so much of a problem. It left the really dry air behind far off to the east there, and out ahead of it, there is some dry air, but not a ton. Very moist atmosphere in its general vicinity at the current time. In the atmospheric spin, the relative vorticity is looking a little bit more bundled at this hour, which is indicative of the closed circulation and it getting a little bit more tightened up. So that could be a sign of some organization there. All right, the big question here, and for a little while, for the last few days, this looked like it was pretty much, I don't want to say set in stone, but close to it, that would move off to the west-northwest and then take a turn to the north, taking advantage of a weakness in the ridge. So what's propelling it to the west is a big area of high pressure, Bermuda High, Azores High in the middle of the Atlantic, pushing this to the west. There's going to be a weakness in it, so that would allow this to escape to the north. But check this out here. These are all of our spaghetti plots. Each line is a different computer model, different run of a computer model. Yesterday, mostly all of these were showing similar trends off to the west-northwest, north, and then northeast. Now there's a handful and a growing number of model members here that show it continuing on a path farther to the west, potentially impacting the Bahamas here with a slower movement. The overall steering pattern is expected to break down, so this is going to slow down, meaning that it may miss that opening, that weakness in the ridge, to drive north. Check it out here on the Gfs Ensemble Run. So remember, this is the GFS model run 30 different times, changing little variables to see if we get a different outcome. And there is a developing split in the member consensus here. Majority still taking it along that north-northeast track out to the southeast of Bermuda. No threat to land, maybe some high surf in Bermuda. But then there's a growing number, again, the outliers that are taking it farther to the west and potentially into the Bahamas. So something to watch. Nothing set in stone here, so we'll see what evolves as we go forward in time. Anyway, you should keep an eye on this if you're in the northern Leeward Islands for some tropical storm watches to go up potentially within the next 48 hours for some winds and some rough surf in these areas, so just keep an eye out for that if you're watching from the Caribbean Islands or the Bahamas or the northern Leeward Islands. Keep an eye on this. How do the models see things? Gfs and European Comparison. GFS here has been more bullish on this getting a stronger storm and then lifting to the north and out to sea. But I do want to show you that European, by Thursday, still has it well to the far south of what the GFS is depicting here. So a big spread between our two long-range global models on where 91L will go. Still a lot of questions and not many answers at this point in time. I do want to jump over to the Eastern Pacific because we've got brand new tropical storm Javier. That should not be a problem for any land masses. Well, it is pretty close to the Baja California, Mexico. But that should be heading out to sea and away from that. It's this wave behind it that's got an 80% chance of developing here, and I want to show you what the models depict this one doing. So there's Javier out to sea. Here's that next wave really exploding and then heading right up into the Baja California by the end of next week. And this could potentially throw a lot of moisture into the desert southwest of the United States. So impacts from a tropical system likely not coming from the Atlantic where we'd expect it, but potentially from the Eastern Pacific. So something to keep an eye on as we get into next week for some more rainfall getting into the desert southwest. So until next time, hope you enjoy your Labor Day weekend. We'll have updates, of course, on the tropics throughout the Labor Day weekend. You can find me on social media, Twitter, Instagram, and on Facebook. I'm also on TikTok at TimTalkWeather. Have a great Friday.